Hi everyone, Tiffany here from Tiffany Gordon Cosplay, and on this episode of Tips videos, we're going to be going over how I made my victorious Janus staff from the game League of Legends. As always, the first step for any cosplay is to get reference images. Next, I made a 2-scale blueprint of the staff and a flat layout of the gem from League of Legends, and that is available on my website. See the link below. I then imported my 2D lines from Adobe Illustrator into a 3D CAD program called Rhino 6 and made each of the shapes. And then I printed them on my Prusa i3 Mark 2.5 3D printer in PETG filament. You can see here the 3 pieces to the top part of the staff as well as the little medallion gem pieces. The only thing missing from this image is the bottom piece that I also 3D printed. Next, I ended up cleaning all of the 3D printed pieces using files, sanding drums, as well as my favorite thing, an abrasive buff or polishing wheel. Now to make the staff where you can actually travel with it and fit it in a suitcase, I had to get a broom and cut it into 2 sections. And then after, I drilled 2 holes into either side of the post, and then I inserted and glued 2 threaded posts on either side, and then also glued in a threaded rod so I could screw the 2 pieces of the staff together. For attaching all of the 3D printed pieces to the actual broom as well as a inner support structure, I cut a clear acrylic rod that would go inside of the broom through all 3 of the 3D printed pieces and continue into the gem. And once my main rod was cut, then I sanded it and epoxied it into the broom. And while that piece was still drying, I applied more epoxy to the entire top half of the wooden broom and put my first piece of the 3D printed part into place and then let fully dry. I then cut 2 more small clear acrylic rods, sanded each piece, and applied epoxy. And while the epoxy was still wet, I then put the second piece of the 3D printed part into place and let fully dry. And once dry, I then repeated the process and attached the final piece to the top half of the staff. For the bottom piece of the staff, I applied epoxy to the inside of the 3D printed piece and slid onto the broom and let fully dry. Now while all of these 3D printed pieces are drying on the staff, let's talk about how I made the gem. Using the template that I made of the gem laid out flat, I traced the pattern onto clear Worbla, and then I cut out using scissors. I then scored each of the lines using an Excel blade, only piercing halfway through the Worbla. This process makes it so you can bend the pieces easily and have a nice crisp edge. To put all of the clear Worbla pieces together, I fused them together using a soldering iron, which you're basically melting the 2 pieces together to make one. I do not recommend using a heat gun because the temperature to fuse them together will end up warping your whole entire gem. And here's what the final gem looks like when it's all put together. And now for a quick little test fit with the rest of the pieces, and it looks good. Now back to the staff. I wanted to get rid of more of the stair steps that are on the 3D printed parts, and to do that, I covered the entire thing in sandable spray paint. Don't forget to mask off the clear acrylic rods. And once it was fully dry, I then masked off areas with masking tape and did a base coat of black airbrush paint, followed by a coat of gold Testors airbrush paint. And once the paint was dry, I then removed all of the masking tape and masked off all of the gold painted areas. And then again, I applied a base coat of black airbrush paint. The base coat of black will help it pop for any metallic colors on top. And then I did a coat of silver airbrush paint, and then removed all of the masking tape when it was done. I repeated the same process for the bottom half of the staff. Once all of the airbrush paint was dry, I then went back by hand and used acrylic paint with silver and gold and black to add some pops and some shadows. Now let's talk about how I painted the gem. I first started by painting the inside of the gem with airbrush paint a dark blue color. I then painted the outside a gradient from a dark blue to a light blue to a turquoise on the top. And when all of the airbrush paint was dry, I then added an iridescent pearl color to kind of add a little bit more sparkle. For attaching the gem to the staff, I applied a bunch of epoxy to the inside little cutout and then put the gem on top and used a little 2-pound weight bag to hold the gem in place while it dried. To seal the staff, I sprayed the entire thing with a coat of satin clear enamel spray paint. The last part of the staff to discuss how I made was the little medallion that hangs on the side. I first cut out 2 pieces of blue fabric using scissors and sewed each ribbon's seams down using a zigzag stitch. And then I attached them to the inside pieces of my little medallion 3D printed parts, and attached each of the 3D printed parts together using epoxy. As for painting the 3D printed pieces, I did those beforehand while I was painting the rest of the staff. I then got some brass wire and made it into an oval shape and then attached to the staff. And that is how I made my Victorious Jana staff from League of Legends. Thanks guys for watching this tips video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Much love!